Hi there, FounderQuest listener. This is Star. We recorded the show you're about to hear last week, and since then, you might say things have gotten a little real. So we're going to be taking a little break from recording next week, and it just doesn't seem right to be publishing these kind of lighthearted tech conversations in this moment in history when so many people are fighting for their own liberation. We will be back, but I'm not going to say exactly when because it's just a little bit more dramatic that way. So stay safe and see you soon. Bye. So the reason that we're just sort of blathering is that we don't actually have a topic for today.
We all just showed up.
We just showed up.
Just rolled out of bed and here we are.
So did those guys really name their app after a meme? Huh? Buckle up, fellow kids. It's time for FounderQuest.
As I was getting ready this morning and reading Twitter and just like, Twitter, something that's come up lately is, and Justin Jackson has talked about this, and there's a couple other people who have talked about this, like on Twitter this morning, it was being talked about, but that's the idea of staying in your lane. Like, if you're a technologist and typically like your podcast is all about business or whatever, like I'm just talking about us, then you should stay in your lane and not talk about current events, whatever. Like people said that to Justin Jackson as he's been talking about like equity and the environment and some of the things that are concerns to him and things that he likes to think about and talk about. So I was thinking about that this morning and I was like, well, we could talk about current events on our podcast. There's no reason why we couldn't. And then I thought, well, except that, maybe this is just a nice break for people that just have too much news in their lives and they can turn to FounderQuest, not reassured that they won't have to deal with all the garbage that's going on. We're going to talk about happy things here.
This is the escape.
Like, I think we're probably not taking an official stance on the staying in your lane thing. I don't really, honestly, like, this is kind of my break and I don't want to like have arguments during it. So like, I don't really want to debate serious topics right now because everything is just on fire.
Yeah.
I guess that's our way of saying that, like, even though like it seems to be like the worst possible timeline. I mean, I read this morning that the monkeys stole the coronavirus samples from the lab and are running wild with them.
Mm-hmm. Sounds
which
legit.
is the plot of a Terry Gilliam movie. Yeah. If you haven't seen, 12 Monkeys, there you go. But
that's a good movie.
Yeah, it is. So I don't know. I guess it's to say like we're all sort of affected by it, but we're not like, I don't know. Like I see some people and it's just, people are just like plowing ahead with like, React is like, here's my hot take on React right now. It's like, nobody really wants to hear that right now, but maybe they do. I don't know. It's hard.
Well, I've been blowing up our Twitter channel with hot takes lately.
Yeah. Just all about anti-React this week.
The anti,
no, not really hot takes, but yeah. Oh yeah. You mean my blog, the blog thing?
Yeah. The blog thing. That's pretty cool.
So if, I don't know if you caught it, Star, but what I've been like kind of just working on my blog a little bit, playing around with things lately. Like I use Jekyll, but I hadn't updated it in a long time. So I like migrated my assets and stuff to Webpack and did some stuff to kind of modernize a little bit. I decided I didn't want to go too far with the modernization and kind of see how far I could get. Like, cause like a lot of people are using like their blogs, like rebuilding their blogs in Jamstack right now to kind of play with like Gatsby or Next.js or, some of these newer front end frameworks. And so I thought it would be fun to do kind of the opposite, like see how close I could get to like the performance that you see with one of these more modern frameworks with just like old school technology. So I'm using just Jekyll and Turbolinks, and I got this cool prefetch script that will do like prefetching of links if you hover over them with your mouse for like 400 milliseconds or whatever, which kind of like speeds up. So really, like it kind of like turns it into like, it feels like a single page app, but it's just, it's just web page, just a web page.
Oh, that's really cool. I actually, like, fun fact, like we had that at Honey Badger before we moved to Jekyll. We had a little prefetch thing.
Yeah. And I've been planning on like,
or not Jekyll, I meant Turbolinks before we moved to Turbolinks.
We had like the PJAX set up with, I remember that. It was like a jQuery prefetch plugin or something.
Yeah, I wrote it.
Did you write it? Okay.
It was Star's prefetch Blue Plate special.
Yeah, that was cool.
I eventually disabled it because it was really kind of hard to get right. Like it kind of like I really got tricky after a while, and I was being too tricky, and it turns out that the world doesn't really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why it hasn't been officially added to TurboLinks. When I was like digging through trying to figure out how to do it, which is what led me to this, like basically a gist that someone made. But there's a bunch of issues on like the TurboLinks GitHub repo talking about it. And it's not like that it will never get added, but I'm assuming it's a difficult thing to implement or something like that for everyone.
Yeah. I forget what the issues were. For a blog, it seems like it would be pretty straightforward though, because it's just like web pages.
Yeah, it's working pretty well on mine. Yeah, it's fun. So I've been meaning to like move that stack over to our blog too. Like eventually I'll apply the same optimizations to Honeybadger, the Honeybadger website. Cool.
So we don't currently use Jekyll. Are you talking about moving it to Jekyll as well, or just
no, just like the front end. I mean, like it's simple just to like install TurboLinks and maybe some prefetching on things. I mean, we could and then like do some optimizations. Have you looked at Purge CSS at all?
I haven't, but I really like the name. So tell me what that is.
Well, it does what it says. It basically, it removes. So it analyzes once you build, if you have your HTML built already, or in the case of Jekyll, if you're like generating it. So you generate your HTML, build your HTML and your assets, like your CSS and stuff. And then it analyzes all of your CSS usage, and then it purges the CSS that you're not using. So imagine if you're using like Tailwind or Bootstrap or something, and you're importing like the entire framework, right? Well, you're not necessarily using a lot of that framework. So you're having to download, like everyone's downloading a bunch of useless CSS basically. So this removes the unwanted stuff.
Is this something that is like in Webpack? How does it do that?
I think it's a third party project, but they have a Webpack plugin. So
okay, so it's back in code though.
Yeah,
I thought for a second that because it has CSS in the name, and a lot of times that means it's like a CSS package or whatever.
Oh yeah, no,
like Bootstrap.
Yeah, this is like a build tool.
Like, what have they added to CSS since I last boned up on it? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a build tool. And for like disclaimer, like I'm new, like I'm just starting to play with this. So if I like butchered the description or something, I'm sorry. But as far as I know, that's what it does. And it's pretty cool. Like it reduced, I forget, like my CSS wasn't like the bundle wasn't huge to begin with, but I think it reduced it from like 6 or 7K to 4, like 3 to 4. So if you like apply that, if you are importing like something like a large CSS framework, I imagine that's a big savings.
I have to ask, like, how does it know which CSS tags are being used and which ones aren't? Like, does it have to be used with like a static site generator, and it just like goes through all the generated pages? Or
I mean, I don't know, like for sure how it works on the back end or how it's implemented, but from what I can tell, it actually I think it actually needs to have your HTML like wherever it is. So I think it could technically like analyze your views. You know, like something if you have like your source HTML or templates or something, like it could I think it can work off of that. But what I'm doing, because Jekyll, I don't like it's generating all of the HTML from Markdown. I just pointed it at the like the site, like the generate directory, where the destination directory. And so then it just analyzes the entire build after the Webpack and Jekyll build, like do their thing.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. So it just works from the production build. I don't know. It seems to work. I mean, it seems to work. Everything looks like it did before adding it, and the bundle is a lot smaller. So
I got introduced to that this week as well. I started playing with Tailwind for the first time, like in depth.
Yeah, do they use Purge? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's part of the
Would you mind giving a little overview of Tailwind?
So Tailwind is a pretty neat CSS framework. It takes a different approach to say something like Bootstrap, where Bootstrap would give you different classes like card or table or things that apply a bunch of styles to give you a certain look. The Tailwind is, I guess, one way you can say it is a bit lower level in that you define those kinds of looks that you want on the actual elements themselves. So instead of a card class, you could say, oh, I want this to be rounded. And so there's like a rounded kind of class. And there's a whole bunch of selectors, as you might imagine, because of all the things that you can do, like, text center and things like that. Well, I've been using Bootstrap for like ever, and it's nice to Tailwind is kind of a breath of fresh air, because as a developer, like I'm not hip to all the design stuff all the time, and like I was always just digging into the Bootstrap reference. Like, oh, what was that card thing again? Do I have to have a card title and a card body? And I just never memorized all those, special class names I was supposed to use. And Tailwind, like, I don't have to remember stuff. It's like, oh, do I want margin? Okay, it's my-2. And now I get two elements of spacing in the Y direction. Like, that's just easier for me to remember. So I can do auto MX and things like that. And it's great.
There's kind of two ways of viewing sort of a CSS framework, which one is like to do components and stuff, which is it's kind of what Bootstrap does. And the other is to do more of a utility type framework, which is what Tailwind does.
Right.
Like, I personally haven't used Tailwind, but I've used the utility approach just with my own sort of cobbled together, like, utility stuff. And I actually kind of really like that. Like, that's how the last time I rebuilt our sales site, like, that's how I did it. And I really enjoyed doing it that way, just because it's like you can read the HTML and tell what it does, as opposed to it's like, okay, I know this has has a class of like new hero 5. It's like, what the hell does that mean? Okay, now I've got to like go search all the CSS files for that,
right?
And see what it's impossible. The only way to tell what style is actually going to be applied to that thing, at least as far as I'm concerned, is like to go and inspect it like in the browser and just see all the inheritance, because it's just the way there's no structure to CSS inheritance. Like, who really knows? Like, yeah.
So that's been fun. It's been a nice change of pace.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Didn't you use Tailwind for some like side project recently?
Yep. Yeah. It's what I've been doing in my spare time this week when I'm not, trying to bail myself out from the water leakage.
Yeah, or the compliance.
Or the compliance stuff. Yeah,
compliance.
It's like you're dealing with like insurance claims and compliance, the compliance process simultaneously.
I might as well just go to law school at night and do the trifecta, right?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe someone can sue you.
But the good news on the compliance is I had a meeting yesterday with the auditor, the first of the meetings where they reviewed our evidence of all the things that we say we're doing. And the meeting went super well. So most of the things that we covered, like, we just done, and we're basically just checking off boxes. There are a few things they got back to me about, like, you should look at this and we need more evidence here. But overall, I was just ecstatic yesterday after getting off that call. Like, all the work that I've been doing over the past several months seems to be close to paying off. So I'm pretty excited. We
really do need to throw a party when all this is wrapped up. I mean, this is a major effort that we've been talking about for pretty much the life of the company.
I know.
I think.
Like, we just need to throw Ben a party. Cause
it went from we could never do that to, well, maybe we'll do that. And then Ben's just like working on it. And yeah.
All throughout this process, as I've talked to people who actually know what they're doing much more than I do, I would ask, well, do you see companies our size doing this? Do you have experience with that? And they're like, yeah, that's not too common, but sure, And so I always just kind of came away from those conversations like, well, I guess we could do it. And then sitting down with this auditor person yesterday, he said, well, you are the smallest company I've ever worked with. And we're going to have to change some things about how we usually do this, because like, we don't have a board of directors, and things like that.
Yeah.
Like, so pro tip for all those small companies like us out there, you do have to find an auditor who's able to be a little flexible in their work, because you might be the first time that they encounter some things. Like, for example, CI/CD. Like, the person I was working with is like, yeah, I know what that is, but a lot of my peers don't. And one of the requirements is that you have a separate, development versus production environment, and that you have a log and a control over what goes into production. And so when you say, oh, well, we have CI/CD, we have continuous integration, continuous deployment, and that, it runs the tests and it pushes the code to production for us automatically, they kind of scratch their heads a little bit and they're like, oh, so you don't have like a process or a person that's the gatekeeper for production? It's like, nope. So they're like, oh, well, then we're going to come up with something.
We had a person write the rules
right
for that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a process. It's just not a person doing it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's things like that. That's like, oh, okay, it's a learning experience for everyone. I think I need to write some sort of mega blog post or maybe miniature ebook about, if you're a tiny tech company, here's what you can expect when
Seriously.
you're about to walk into
You
this.
should-
Oh, you
compliance.
should.
Okay, we should
You could sell that.
we
even.
should write we should do an ebook. That would be totally, just put it on Gumroad as a downloadable.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, like you could even just do a screencast like with a brain dump for like an hour and a half or something.
Oh, that would be more than an hour and a half. But yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, a 7-part,
Yeah.
7-session.
A mini series, on Lifetime TV, right?
Yeah, I had fun the other day though when you were like, could y'all help me like think of threats to the business and things? It's like you're asking me to think of like things that could go wrong. Is I was born for this. This is my jam. I'm great at thinking about like about things that could go wrong.
I still need to do that. Spend a little time thinking about worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
That's all right. Come on over to the dark side.
Yeah, that was one of 3 things that I didn't have ready in time for the call yesterday. And so that's the last of the work I need to do next week to be able to get this hurdle and get our type 1 report in process.
Yay.
What's the upshot of all this? Like what comes out of it? What we'll be able to offer customers once we get this?
Especially for publicly traded companies who might want to use us as a processor, they have to attest that they are managing all of their data in a secure fashion. They have to go through the same process. And part of that process is you have to say, okay, for all of our key vendors that handle sensitive data, they also need to assert that they abide by these kinds of policies. And if you're in that situation where you need to attest that, yes, your data is being treated securely by your vendors, there's 2 ways that you can get that done. You can ask the vendor for their SOC 2 report. And so an auditor has given an opinion that, yes, they are following good policies. Or you can ask that vendor to fill out a security questionnaire. Or I guess you could visit thear office and make sure, you could do a personal inspection. But typically, it's either going to be, you're going to ask that vendor for a SOC 2 or ISO 27001 report, or you're going to ask that vendor to fill out this security questionnaire. And when you receive one of those, and we've received a few of those from our customers, it's painful. It's super painful because they ask you basically all the same things that you would go through in a compliance thing, like, your security posture, your privacy stuff. So just going through the process once and having an auditor give you their opinion that, yes, this company is being run well, then you can just turn that over to customers who need that as part of their process to become, compliant. And then it just saves everyone a whole bunch of time.
I've got a question for you. It sounds like compliance is kind of like the GPL and that's kind of like viral.
Yes.
Like if you want to be compliant, all your vendors that you use have to be compliant.
Yeah.
But for them to be compliant, all their vendors need to be compliant. So
yeah,
like, would it be fair to say that by providing this to our customers, we're allowing our customers to, service bigger customers that may require compliance reports?
Yep.
All right. So, we are opening entire new markets for our customers.
You never know.
Well, I'll give you.
It's time to raise prices.
I will give you a for instance. So as I was talking to the auditor yesterday, we were talking about our vendors, the vendors that Honey Badger uses. And, we use Amazon Web Services. And so obviously they have a whole bunch of, compliance stuff done, right? Like you can go and download their SOC 2 reports and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We use other providers like Twilio for sending SMS. And one of the vendors that we use that we do rely on for delivering our services to our customers, we don't have a report from them yet. And so I do need to go to them and say, hey, I know you don't have a full SOC 2 report because I've asked you for that in the past and you didn't have it. So please answer my security questionnaire. So now I'm on the other end.
You're the one with the questionnaire. Oh no.
Yeah.
That must make you feel so powerful.
Well, it just makes me feel kind of frustrated. It's like, oh, I don't want to spend my time doing this, but we do depend on
you feel
them,
like a stooge.
So, yeah, exactly. I feel pretty bad about it actually, but got to do it, because my auditor is going to be talking to me like, okay, well, how do you know that they're being secure with your stuff? Yeah, there you go.
And one thing to come out of this, I'm really liking is that whenever we have to do something that people don't like and they're like, why are you doing this? We're like, gotta do it. The auditor says we gotta do it. Sorry.
Yeah. it's always helpful to have that third party somewhere nebulous behind the scenes that, oh, I'm sorry, I can't help you. My hands are tied.
I wonder how far you could take that. It's like, yeah, no, I'm sorry, we can't rename errors to notifications in our tabs. The auditor won't let us.
Well, I mean, parents do this all the time, right? You know, the kid comes to dad and says, hey, dad, I want to blah. And dad's like, I'm not sure I want to say yes to this, but I kind of need some backup. So he says, well, go ask your mother. Right? And so, and as the kid is heading towards mom, you know, there's this kinetic or telekinetic communication happening, right? This dad is winking at the mom, whatever, like, or shrugging, or giving that, you know what I'm talking about, giving that signal, like, just say no. and then the parents talk about it later, right? And they decide what they're going to do and how they're going to handle the situation. But yeah, it's nice to have that someone to blame it on.
It's like an auto dealership trick. Like,
yeah, totally. I'm going to go back to my manager.
I'll have to go check. I'll have to check with my manager. Right. Oh, sorry.
Right.
You could just give them, if they ask for something, just give them a compliance questionnaire. Say, fill this out.
I can do that for you, but first you have to fill out this 60 question form.
It's before I can read your support ticket. I'm sorry, you're required to fill this out.
Well, speaking of support tickets, we got a support request that came in this week asking for a feature. And the person was very nice about it and said, you know, this is a problem that I'm having. And I can't find a place in your application where I can change this. Did I miss it? And I really appreciated that approach is very non-confrontational. You know, there are nice ways to say things and not so nice ways to say things. And so this, unfortunately, we don't have the feature that this person wanted. And of course, they already knew that because they couldn't find it in the UI, and that's why they're asking. But so I said, yeah, sorry, we don't have that. So they came back and said, well, you know, could you add that? And even though I'm not a paying customer, I do send paying customers your way. So, you know, smiley face. And I grinned at that and I thought, you know, we actually don't discriminate against our non-paying customers when they send in support requests like that. We consider every feature request equally. We are very, you know, magnanimous about that sort of thing here at Honey Badger. I just thought it was very kind, very polite way to ask nicely for something. And I think we'll have to turn around and build that just because he was so nice.
Oh, I love it. It's heartwarming. One thing that Josh and Ben Finlay and I talked about on our marketing call yesterday is that, you know, a lot of times the non-paying customers and the paying customers are the same people. Yeah. I mean, I don't really have any evidence for this, but like I've done it before. Like I've had free accounts in a service and then I'm like, hey, we should use this in our business. And, you know, then we have a paid account for it too. So anyway, we're talking about that in the context of how it might be useful to, instead of tailoring like all of our messaging to sort of free trials and student accounts, instead of tailoring that messaging to like getting them to upgrade to a paid account, perhaps we should try tailoring that messaging to sell them on how they should bring Honey Badger into their other projects, you know? It's like why you should bring Honey Badger to your day job if you're working on a side project or whatever.
Especially in the context of, because we've been having a significant number of GitHub student signups still because we're part of the GitHub student pack. And those people, like they might not have jobs yet, but they're learning and we know they're going to have jobs soon. So, you know, it's a perfect opportunity to make a good impression and hopefully suggest that they can bring Honey Badger with them when as they embark on their new careers.
And even if they do like start some hot new startup or whatever, like they're not going to use their GitHub student account for it, probably. Like,
but probably wouldn't happen. Do you want to switch gears a little bit and talk about work-life balance? Because there was this discussion yesterday that I was discussing with Justin Jackson and a few others on Twitter.
I don't mind switching gears. Like I learned to drive on a manual.
Yeah. So I did. I spoke a little bit for the three of us. So I thought it might be good to get your takes on like our early starting years, because the discussion was about how much time it requires to start a new company or a new business. I think we were kind of talking more about software as a service businesses in particular. But there's this tweet that went around that was talking about like basically like you can start a small, medium, or like large, like you can start an Uber sized business, and each of those businesses are going to take all of your time. So the point was like, so start the big one. And the example was like, you're all gonna have to work 100 hours a week on all of these to start them. And Justin was like, hell no, you don't need to work 100 hours a week on anything.
Okay.
And so he started this discussion about like, there's a lot of small businesses out there that are starting on much less time than 100 or even 50 hours a week, say. So I was thinking back, and what I recall, I recall working, because I was working a full-time, like 9 to 5, like 8 hours a day on my freelance business. So I'd work like usually a few hours in the morning and maybe a few hours in the evening or over the weekend or something on Honey Badger. But I think it probably totaled like an extra 10 to 20 hours initially, I would guess. I guess we might even have timesheets somewhere, because I think we were logging our time eventually. But does that sound about right? So what I said was that total, including like a 40-hour a week, like day job, I was working probably 50 to 60-hour weeks for the initial period while we built up our revenue to the point where we could start shifting from our jobs and freelance income to Honey Badger, at which point we didn't continue that extra work. So we worked less over time as we replaced our income.
I think that's true in the large. Since I was responsible for the ops stuff, I think my time commitment was a little higher in those early days. Even after we transitioned to full time, I think I was spending probably more than 40 hours a week on stuff. But
on Honey, like combined or on?
Well, so early on, I agree, like 10-ish hours a week when we still had full time jobs. Then, we transitioned to. Well, Star and I transitioned to doing freelancing for a while between the full-time job and being full-time on Honey Badger. And that was like a ramp, I guess. Over time, I just built up my Honey Badger time and decreased my freelancing time as the revenue allowed it. But then once Honey Badger was full-time, I think even still then for quite a while, I would say 50 to 60-hour weeks, because I was dealing with stuff after hours that I didn't choose to deal with, right? I had to deal with.
I wasn't really thinking about the point of after the transition was over. But I still get the feeling, like I think in general, I don't know. I also made the point that it's a little bit hard to separate between these things, because I often code for fun, and back then, and even still, like Honey Badger, it was a side project then. It's not a side project now, but I still there's lots of projects that I enjoy working on. And so like a lot of times I'll find myself, hacking, but it's, it's hard to say, is this work or is this just my hobby? So
yeah. Ian Landsman made that point in one of his tweets. He was like, yeah, but you're kind of forgetting about if you're reading about the thing and you're studying about how to do whatever, that's work. Right. And to your point,
talking about it on Twitter for hours into the evening,
that stuff is fun. It's not just work. It's also a hobby.
Yeah.
And so, I can easily spend a lot of time doing what someone would call work because I think it's fun.
So, I don't know. And also I think it was good that we were able to use the product. Like I said, we were the first customers of Honey Badger, and we built it for ourselves. And we were using it during our day jobs because that's where we needed it. So, even as we were working, we were using it as a tool for our clients or employers or whatever. But it gave us the opportunity to, that helped us iterate faster. And I'm sure there were times when we were able to go and improve a little thing or fix a little bug or something in the process of doing our normal work, which helped.
Yeah, I think when I had my day job, and actually even I guess when we're freelancing afterwards, I would work evenings a lot more, but I probably didn't really go over 60 hours too often. I think I was actually, we didn't really discuss this, but it just kind of worked out this way, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I may have been the first person to actually go sort of full time because I moved to Mexico. I didn't need a ton of money to live and all that. And I didn't have kids at the time, and I wasn't married. And so I don't know, but it was only by a couple months. It wasn't a huge thing.
Yeah. I think it depends on the so on the discussion of whether you can can you start a business on less than 100 hours a week? Obviously. Can you start it on less than 40? Yes. Like totally. But it all depends on the situation. Like you can't start every business probably with just one person working under 40, like say 30 hours a week. You're not going to start Uber single-handedly working 30 hours a week.
Or 100 hours a week.
Or 100 hours a week. Yeah, probably, to be honest. But there's a lot of businesses you could. Yeah.
Can I just say that this whole premise, like the whole tweet about like, you know, you're going to be working 100 hours a week and you can do a small, medium, or large business. So you might as well do the large business. It's just, I'm sorry. That's just
pretty
dumb.
BS take. Yeah.
That's just idiotic because, well, first of all, there's so many differences. Like the lifestyle of having a small or medium-sized business is quite different from the lifestyle of having an Uber-sized business. There's a difference between like, are you trying to start a business to support yourself and your family and your employees versus are you trying to start a public company?
Is your goal to ship yourself to the moon eventually or something like that? Like we all have different.
I think the source of this is this. I think where this like stupidity is coming from is the source of a lot of stupidity, especially online, which is everybody like assumes everybody else has the same like values and experiences and goals as they do, and that if they are not achieving those, or maybe then it must be some sort of failure, or it must be just dumb. Like it seems like half the internet now is sort of people taking things out of context. And so I don't know, maybe I'm taking this tweet out of context because I haven't even seen it.
So one thing I'll add here that was not a tweet, was actually someone talking to me back in the olden days when we talked face to face.
What?
Yeah. He made an interesting point that's stuck with me since then. And he said, you really only have so many years, right? So you only get so many businesses you get to build. And you should think about that when you're thinking about what kind of business you want to build next. Because we were talking about big versus small. And of course, it's down to personal preference. And that's exactly the point. Like you only get so many times to go out there and try this, right? You might build, 3 or 4 or 5 businesses in your lifetime. So choose what's going to make you happy, not just the final destination that you think will make you happy, but also the process, the journey, right? It's, that old phrase about it's the journey, not the destination, because you only get a few decisions like this in your lifetime. Might as well make the most out of each one of them, regardless of whatever your personal goals are. Just decide and be deliberate about that.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way of looking at it. And I mean, the whole like journey before destination thing, which like, yes, I'm referencing the King Killer Chronicles, which I know you love, Ben.
I do.
That makes sense for another reason too, because like you might not get to your destination. If your destination is like if your destination is $1 billion startup, chances are good you're not going to get there. So it's, if you're miserable the whole time and then you don't get there, that just sucks, right? So
Totally.
Why would you want to do that?
Going back to the situation, like how everything depends on the situation, thinking back, like in your 20s, like no kids. Like when we started Honey Badger, like I was just like recently married. I think I'd been married for a couple years, but it was just us, and we had a house and stuff. But we were renting at that point. Even working 50-hour weeks like that, just think of all the free time. Just think of all the free time that we had working 50-hour weeks. Like, it's very relative. Like now it's like, barely work like a 30-hour week and still, yeah, I don't know.
That's a good point.
I don't have a problem with like, if you have the time, you're young and if you like to do the work, like I'm not going to rain on anyone's parade of like wanting to work a little over 40 hours. Like there's no like set in stone. Like you can't work over 40 hours or you're like a terrible person or something like.
Oh, that's true. And it just like, it depends on the person.
I mean, what are you doing with the rest of your time? Does anyone ever talk about that? Like
I'm building out my Animal Crossing island. It's funny. It's like it's in pandemic and being home so much and everything. It's like getting less done, being able to work less hours. Although like my amount of work I do in a day, like not like work, but like the amount of labor I do in a day has probably doubled. And so it's just it's just, I don't know. Like everybody has their own situation. And the thing is, like everybody can, I'm not going to say it's possible in every situation because some people definitely are in really rough situations, but it's possible to start a business in a variety of situations in terms of work, in terms of like the amount of time that you can put in. And it really kind of depends on a lot of factors other than that. Like that's probably one of the, like there's a lot of factors that are a lot more important than that, I think.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, we're at time. I feel like this is a pretty positive message to leave people with, especially since like we live in the worst possible timeline. And I'm feeling good about this. Are y'all feeling good about this?
You know, FounderQuest is all about bringing you the calm, peaceful, reassuring thoughts that you need in the times of crisis, pandemic, and world turmoil.
That's true. And aren't we so privileged to be able to like have those calm, peaceful thoughts and not just be like thrown in the middle of the fire ourselves right now?
Real.
As I think about that every day. All right. So if you have enjoyed this show, dear listener, please go to Apple Podcasts and review us. And if you would like to write for us, we do hire people to do blog posts about Ruby, Elixir, cool stuff. Go to our blog at www.honeybadger.io/blog. And there's a link up there that says write for us. So go check that out. And yeah. Oh, one side benefit. I haven't said this before, but one side benefit, if you do want to write for us, like you get to like have a one-on-one like call with me because I gotta check you out. I gotta make sure you're for real.
What more could you ask for?
I know, right?
we should be charging them.
I know. Why are we even paying people?
FounderQuest is a weekly podcast by the founders of Honey Badger. Zero instrumentation, 360-degree coverage of errors, outages, and service degradations for your web apps. If you have a web app, you need it. Available at honeybadger.io. Want more from the founders? Go to FounderQuestPodcast.com. That's one word. You can access our huge back catalog or sign up for our newsletter to get exclusive VIP content. FounderQuest is available on iTunes, Spotify, and other purveyors of fine podcasts. We'll see you next week.